In terms of what the Canadian Football League did this week, it's not surprising to anybody. Pushing back the Grey Cup, it's going to be interesting to see what the reaction. Let's say everything goes smoothly, right? And whether it's halfway through the season or at some point in the season, Tim Hortons Field can be packed,
Yeah.
or at least 50%. And then we work ourselves into the Grey Cup. It's going to be interesting seeing the reaction of, and maybe it's because the Grey Cup we haven't seen it in such a long time, especially in Hamilton, that the reaction will be joyful and everybody will be excited.
Yeah.
But I wonder what the feeling is going to be a Grey Cup in December, the second week of December.
Yeah. So here was my thought was I saw some people online saying Bob Young deserves better. Like they should have changed the Grey Cup out of Hamilton in 2021. They should have given it to him in 2023 when it could be a true week-long celebration and there won't be anything that's kind of a little bit dampened down. I disagree with that because for me, vaccine rollouts maybe haven't been great here to start, but that can't last forever. Like it has to get significantly better. And by the time we get to December, if we're not fully vaccinated by December of 2021, what the hell? Like
Oh,
that was the thing for me was if because everyone's saying this shouldn't be a sad celebration and a half season. How much are you going to care about the fact that we played 14 games, not 18, and that you could only attend 8 of those 14 games, or 7 of those 14 games in your home stadium, and maybe less if you're a Ticats fan, where you only got to go to 4 to 6 regular season games, let's say, and playoff games. How much are you going to care when you're standing around fully vaccinated, drinking beers with 1,000 people on the concourse of Tim Hortons Field in the lead up to the Grey Cup? You're not.
yeah.
You're not going to care. It's going to be the same Grey Cup as long as you're fully vaccinated, as long as everyone's allowed to be in there, as long as health and protocol and variants don't go crazy and people don't need boosters and all these things that, again, over my head, medical sciences, do your thing. Love you guys. Keep at it. But I look at this and I think to myself, like, the idea that this is somehow for Hamilton going to be a sad Grey Cup that's not going to have the same celebratory nature and the social festivity that we are used to at Grey Cups, I just don't believe that. And maybe I'm making a mistake and not understanding where we are at or where we're going to be. But if we are projected to be able to get enough people into the stands, whether it's 25%, 50%, 75% by August, September, Labor Day, if we're talking about December Grey Cup, if by Halloween, October 31st of 2021, we're not at full capacity because everybody's vaccinated, how is it possible that we're not going to have a Grey Cup that's going to have full capacity, full celebration, normal festivities,
Yep.
all the rest? So I do think that it would have been wrong more so to take this away from Hamilton because I think I know Matt Affinick well enough, and you do, Kyle, as well from the Tiger Cats, and we know Bob Young well enough and Scott Mitchell well enough to know that those guys are kings at seeing opportunity and being able to turn it into something memorable. And for them, I guarantee Matt and Scott and Bob are not looking at this with the Ticats organization, the city of Hamilton, and everybody who's partnered up in this Grey Cup celebration. They're not looking at this as, well, maybe we'll trip over ourselves here and we'll just kind of end up with a Grey Cup and hopefully it doesn't suck. They're looking at it as, guys, we can create one of the marquee events in the history of Canadian sport returning from a pandemic as the celebration that brought Canada back together from sea to shining sea on national television for everybody to see. Here's our stadium. Here's what Hamilton's about. Here's what Canadian sport's about. Here's what the CFL is about. And I love the idea of Hamilton and the people that are in charge of the Grey Cup Festival saying, let's not be scared of this. Let's follow all the protocols and make sure that it's going to be difficult. You're going to have all this construction taken care of, and you're going to have people from different industries that are going to be coming back at varying levels of availability thanks to the lockdowns that are still happening right now. But once we get everybody on the same page and everybody's on board, let's make an event that people will never forget. There's a real opportunity in front of Hamilton right now. And I would say this, whether this was in Winnipeg, Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, Saskatchewan, it doesn't matter to me. Like, I would say that this event, the Grey Cup, Randy Ambrosie, when I talked to him probably about a month and a half, 2 months ago about this, he said his best case scenario for the Grey Cup in 2021 is him standing on a podium at the end of the season, the snow coming down, and looking around and seeing all of the fans smiling and wearing their team colors and waving their flags and the players celebrating and not having to wear masks and it feeling like a Grey Cup. And I just think that when Randy envisions that moment, I think he envisions that moment in Hamilton. And I think that's why these discussions probably never even happened about moving the Grey Cup again, because we've already flipped Regina from 21 to 22. I don't think they were going to go, okay, Regina goes from 20 to 22. Hamilton keeps 21. Now let's move Hamilton 21 to 23 and keep, like, I don't think they just want to keep bumping it down the road. They want to say, listen, you guys feel like you can get this off the ground? You feel like you can make this a moment that we all remember? Yeah, then let's go. And I applaud them for doing that. And that's the vision that I have as well. That's honestly my motivation going forward here, covering the team, covering the league, writing articles, all this stuff, is thinking about that moment where everyone's standing together, having a beer at the Grey Cup Festival. It's 3:00 in the afternoon. You know, the sun is starting to kind of dim a little bit because now it's December 12th, which means the sun's going to go down hella early, which is going to be amazing if you're actually in the stadium for that Grey Cup. The environment there, the passion there, the national anthem there. There's going to be so many moments in this Grey Cup, if we can make it come to fruition, that you're never going to forget.
And realize this too. What an opportunity the Ticats and the CFL have in creating something special where Canada comes back together. We always talk about it. The fan base of the CFL, it's a lot older. You've been at Grey Cup parties. I've been at Grey Cup parties. If there are young people there, they're there because, hey, this place has beer. And that's why we're here. What's to say in Hamilton, all the young people that don't come to Ticats games or care about the CFL, they'll now jump on this because, hey, I can go out again. This is the first time I can go out again. Canada's coming back together. I can go out with my friends and not have people stare at me where it's like, where's your mask and where's this? That is everything coming together. There's also alternative to this, right? I worry that we're still in some form of restrictions. The Ticats don't make the Grey Cup. Nobody wants to travel during this period, during the pandemic. And all of a sudden, we're relying on Ticats fans to fill these places at some percentage of capacity. And if the Ticats aren't in the Grey Cup, what's driving them to do so, if there are restrictions still in place locally?
I think CFL fans, I should say Ticats fans would be so desperate at that point, even if their team lost, they would say, weird year, never really got a full opportunity, which is always the funny caveat, right? Like the NBA bubble, the NHL bubble were like that. If you lost early, you would just go, wow, weird year, I can't do anything about it. But if you're like the Miami Heat and you make it to the NBA Finals, you're like, hey, man, we masked the bubble. We're even better off for it. This is one of the hardest championships to ever win. So it's really just revisionist history of how you want to look at these things. But I think Ticats fans would show up in droves for a Grey Cup that the Ticats weren't playing in, because they love CFL football and they love Canadian football at large, 3 downs, 55, all these things that we have been discussing about a possible CFL XFL merger. That I look at this and think to myself, like, I have to believe, maybe for my own mental well-being, but I have to believe by December, travel's going to be safer. Like, I have to believe that restrictions will be lifted. I have to believe that percentages of capacity are going to raise over time. I just don't think, when I envision December 2021, that we're still going to be under a lot of this stuff. And maybe that's naive, because there's twists and turns to this stuff that are completely out of our control, as we know from what's happened over the last year. If you would have told me in March, going into the pandemic, that, hey, you know, your summer's going to be good. So this is what's so funny about the pandemic. And I don't know if funny is the right word, but the way that this has progressed in our own minds, and everybody listening to this, I think you can relate. When it started in March, Kyle, how long did you think life was going to be different?
Ooh, maybe 2 months.
I think in the first...
I was naive, right?
Of course, because we've never been through this. We don't understand how these things work. We don't understand how long it takes vaccines to roll out. We don't comprehend how fast things can spread, how many people can be affected. And so when it first was, hey, there's cases in Canada, I'm like, yeah, whatever. And then, you know, it's March and I'm still not wearing a mask. Like, I'm walking around because the whole idea of wearing masks for a while, it took a while for people to socialize themselves that, hey, this is the thing. And I think the government mandates and mask mandates probably help that. But the first month, I wasn't even wearing a mask. I'm going to the grocery store without a mask on, which now I just feel like a complete asshole for. But at the time, I didn't know. I didn't realize the importance. I didn't understand the science behind why this was important. And so I thought, well, we'll be out of this by the time the warm weather comes. And then we got promised by people, hey, the warm weather and it's going to be better and more outside and, people won't be spreading it. They won't be trapped indoors with each other. Okay, cool. And then the summer comes and they lift some stuff. And then we go into the fall. And in the fall, things get worse. In December, it really starts to get worse. And then we go into a second lockdown in Ontario. And we come out of the second lockdown and we're all like, well, that was definitely the last one. And then we go through January, February, March. Ooh, things are bad again. Third wave variants. And so it's like, if you would have asked me in March of 2020 how long this was going to take to come out of, I would have said June 2020. If you asked me in June 2020, I would have said August. If you asked me in August, I would have said, I don't know, maybe September. You asked me in October, I would have said January because things were not going well. Yeah. You asked me in January, I would have said, well, once this lockdown's done, take a couple months, clean yourself up, get the vaccines rolled out, we'll all be okay. Well, vaccines are slow. Didn't see that one coming. Okay, now we're talking March. All right, well, now you ask me here April 23rd, how long it's going to take. And I'm thinking, well, it's got to be July, right? I mean, you got guys in camp and you might not be able to have fans in the stands, but it's not going to be fully vaccinated and done with. But I would have to think that we're going to be okay by September, August, maybe even if we're looking at this. My goal for full stadiums and normalcy is September. But based on the way that I just told you, that timeline has shifted about 10 different times over the last 14 months. It does feel a little naive for me to be so hopeful. And I have no choice but to hold on to that hope, as many other people do. But if we get into a really bad third wave or something changes drastically and we end up getting to a point in, let's say, July where they have to push the season to September, well, there's only one more drop dead date that you can miss, and that's September, right? And I talked about this with DT on the breakdown this week is I don't want to imagine a world in which we have to push these things further and further and further, because I do genuinely think like we're close to the end. And by close, I mean a half a year or more, but that feels close considering we've just been through a year and a half of this. And so now I'm looking at it and thinking, I can't wrap my mind around accepting anything else. But if we end up having to miss some of these marquee dates and moments going forward, stuff gets complicated really quick. And if it gets complicated, you get into the danger zone closer. So when I heard July players reporting and I heard August kickoff, my heart rate went up because I went, it's real. But you have to realize, like you say, that it's real if we can get fans in the stands and if we can also get vaccination rollouts happening faster. And all of that is still up in the air. So there's a lot of hope, but there's also a lot of frustration and hesitancy.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up good points. And I think we're looking at this from like an Ontario bias, of course, right? Because in Ontario, it seems like, is this ever going to end? In other provinces, I have a buddy that lives out in Alberta. There are people in Alberta now that don't even wear masks going into stores.
Well,
right?
To be fair, people in Alberta never wore masks, but anyways.
Potentially, that's true. And people in America as well. I have another buddy that just got vaccinated last week, and he said the mood has completely changed, right? Soon as you start seeing those cases per day whittle down, and people want to hit the streets again. And maybe you have to do that, cautiously, as we saw with the second lockdown, now third lockdown, and the third wave of this. And I talked earlier about kind of hope is paralyzing. I think it works with the pandemic as well, right? Where we think we're on the better side of this, but the numbers will tell you not. Mm-hmm. In Ontario, outside of Ontario, it's a little bit of a different story. Yeah. Now, what do we have to do to get our numbers down? And to what level, and this is what I've always been saying during this pandemic, what number do we need to get to start opening stuff back up? What's the number? And nobody says it ever. What's the number we have to get to? As soon as you give people goals, anything in life, right? I want to make this amount of money. I want to lose this much weight. You have goals in front of you. You have something to achieve. People can say, okay, we're getting closer. We're getting closer. We're getting closer. At least you have something to look forward to. With this of, we're locking down indefinitely, and we're not going to give you a number that's safe for us to open back up, that really like kind of pisses me off. And that needs to change.
Maybe it's just because we've never been close enough to that number they have in mind, but we don't know what that number is. So how can we
just
possibly
give it to us?
How can we possibly
They
know?
know.
You're right. It's a weird optics game. Maybe it's semantics more than anything else. But